Thanks for being here with us to talk to us about Nelson Miller and your experience working for a world-class leading supplier of product identification and user interface solutions. That is a mouthful. What is it that you do?
So I serve as, my official title is Key Accounts Manager, but since I work remotely, I have to work sort of as my own business. I have to find my customers, I have to present our product, convince the customer to submit an order, make that order sure that order is conveyed properly to the factory and produced properly and shipped on time. And then if there are any quality and billing issues, I have to take care of those as well. So I have to interface with all aspects of my customer's business to try to sell my product.
What is the product?
So we make graphic interface solutions as well as human interface products.
Such as?
A graphic interface solution would be something like the touchpad on your microwave oven is a great example. It's a membrane switch is what we call it. It's really the things that you touch when you're interfacing with a piece of equipment. We also make product identification, which is the nameplate you might see on a piece of equipment identifying the manufacturer or model.
And some of the things that you handle are showing now on the screen for the class, the end-to-end process, how you communicate and your audience, and how you have to go inside and outside your company. Tell us about that.
Well, I work primarily remotely from home or at my customer's location, so I very rarely get to see my coworkers. I work with a factory in Los Angeles, another one in Wisconsin, and with factories overseas in China primarily. So my workday is quite long. I typically get up in the morning at 6 a.m. First thing I do is check my email to see what communication I might have received from China. And since we have 12 hours time difference to them, it gives me an opportunity to get in touch with them before they've gone to bed to see if I can resolve any open issues. Then I take care of my European customers because it's their afternoon in my morning. And then in the middle of my day, then California's waking up and I can talk to our headquarters in California. I work through the afternoon, and by the time the evening rolls around at about 7 p.m. Eastern time, I can then get in touch with China again because they're just waking up. So it's quite a long day, and I have to try to make sure that all my communication goes effectively. It's primarily either email or phone calls, and a lot of what I do with China is email, and I do it in such a way that it's very clear. I want to make sure my messages are clear so that when they're working on it while I'm asleep, they don't have any questions that they have to ask me. They'll be able to come back with an answer for my morning.
So there's a lot of editing, proofreading, revising to make sure you have those clear, concise sentences.
I certainly want to make sure I have clear, concise sentences. I'd hope, given that I've been doing this for 28 years, I don't have to revise it too often. But I make use of a lot of bulleted points and short sentences and things of that nature because I'm dealing primarily in China with people whose first language is not English.
And leading us to that bullet, it's a world of culture. And we've talked a little bit before you joined us and in the reading that the students are doing about time orientation. What changes do you notice or differences do you notice in the cultures with how they handle time?
Well, there's a lot of cultural differences, specifically with regard to time. Many of the Asian cultures, for example, have a much longer view. In the U.S. and in my company in particular, there's always that drive to show results for that month or that quarter and how much have you produced for the company. Whereas in a lot of the Asian cultures, they're taking a very long view. And you can see that in some of the trade wars that have happened between Asian countries and the U.S., in that the Asian countries will take certainly a 10-year view if they have to try to get the result they want, because the result they'll get after 10 years may last for 50 years. And the U.S. culture is much more urgent and pressed to get a result now. Thanks.
Leading us to the different styles, the low context and high context cultures. And you've certainly adjusted how you deal with your coworkers as well as people around the world.
Well, I'm trying to have a good relationship with my coworkers, and I hope that they're trying to have a good relationship with me. So I would think that we're very tolerant of each other and trying to accommodate each other's cultural differences. But it's very interesting to learn about how they do things and take that into account. And I find that the other cultures very much appreciate it when I try to do something to accommodate what their culture is. Even if I don't do it correctly, they appreciate the effort. For example, in the U.S., you might see a bride wearing white, and that's very common. And then at a funeral, you wear black. But at a Japanese wedding, for example, it's the opposite. White is a color of mourning in Japan, and you might not realize that. So things like where you sit in a room, what colors you wear, what color your company logo is, all that can have a deep meaning in an Asian culture where it might be glossed over and ignored in North America.
So in other words, doing your homework.
Yes, yes. Whenever I travel to a different country, I try to do a little research on that country, what the culture is, what's popular, what's not popular, and certainly things not to do, more so than things you should do. For example, I know that in Arab countries, it's considered rude to show the bottom of your foot to somebody. You know, if you were to sit down and cross your legs, you want to make sure you don't show the bottom of your foot to somebody because they consider it rude.
Have you learned any languages?
No, I find that I'm not very good with languages. I know a few words in each language, certainly enough to say hello, please, and thank you. I've made a little effort to learn some of the Chinese written language. I'm better with my vision than my ears, I guess. One of the problems I've had is in the Chinese language in particular, because most of my work is with China, the language includes 5 tones. So you'll have the same sound pronounced 5 different ways, like or. There's a very little difference between that to a North American listener, but it has a very different meaning to a Chinese listener. And the example I usually give is the word ma, M-A. Pronounced one way, ma, and I'm not going to get it right, but pronounced one way, ma, it means mother, like mama, a baby would say. But if you say it a different way, ma, it means horse. And if you get the two confused, you might insult your mother.
There you go.
So,
and you also tell a good story about a conference call meeting that took place. I believe it was in Chicago, and the N-word.
Yes. So it was a conference call that I had to arrange at my customer's site between their quality department and our factory in China. So I was sitting, it was in Detroit, yes, at the table, and we had the conference call going on. And then, of course, at our factory in China, there was a group of our quality staff around the conference table in China. So there was some discussion going back and forth. And one of the things you may have learned is something called a verbal pause. So in the U.S., you might be speaking and you'll go or like, and it's a filler word that you use to put in while you're thinking about what you're going to say next. And they have a similar thing in China. So in this particular instance, the quality director that I was sitting with in the U.S. had asked a question of the group in China, and they had to have some internal discussion in Chinese while they came up with the answer. And of course, we could hear them over the conference call phone. And one of them used the filler word that they use in China, which is N-I-G-A, niga, niga. He was going niga, niga, because it was a pause. And the quality director I was sitting with was African American, and he heard that and he got very upset. I realized, of course, what was happening, and I explained to him just what I'm explaining now and calmed him down, but it was a tense moment.
Yeah.
Another example I give is we have a Romanian engineer working for us in California, and we were working on a conference call with a customer, and the customer was explaining something, and the Romanian was using his word for yes, which is da, D-A-H, da. And he was going da, da, acknowledging what the customer was saying. Well, the customer thought he was saying duh, like isn't that obvious, and belittling the customer. And they thought he was rude to them. So I had to, again, jump in and explain what was going on. So things that seem innocent can have a big meaning.